When the collapse stretches beyond one season, when it's not just a bad year but a decade of instability, the only people still eating are the ones who planted perennials, not annuals, not crops. You replant every spring, wasting lots of time and energy that could be put somewhere else. Perennials. The crops that come back year after year require almost zero maintenance and keep producing food even when you can't get seeds, fertilizer, or fuel. Unfortunately, most survival gardeners are still stuck planting tomatoes and beans like it's a weekend hobby. But perennials are survival infrastructure. You plant them once, and they feed you for 20 years. No reseeding, no tilling, no dependency on supply chains. If you're watching this, you already know something's wrong. So here's the deal. Hit subscribe now. Because by the time most people figure out that annual gardens fail under long-term stress, you'll already have a food forest producing while they're desperately searching for seeds that don't exist anymore. These 10 perennial crops work in growing zones 3 through 7, meaning most of North America and beyond. They're chosen because they survive, neglect, produce serious calories or nutrition, and regenerate themselves without you lifting a finger. Let's start with number 10. Number 10. Siberian Pea Shrub, the nitrogen-fixing survival hedge. Most people have never heard of Carigana arborescens, but in harsh climates, Siberia, Mongolia, northern Canada, this shrub has kept people and livestock fed through winters that would kill most garden crops. It's not decorative, it's functional, and in a long-term collapse, function is all that matters. Here's what makes it survival grade. Siberian pea shrub is a nitrogen-fixing legume. That means it pulls nitrogen from the air and deposits it into the soil through its roots, making everything around it grow better. In a scenario where you can't buy fertilizer and your soil is depleted from years of farming, this plant regenerates your land while feeding you. It grows 8 to 12 feet tall, tolerates temperatures down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, and survives drought, poor soil, and total neglect. You plant it once as a hedge, windbreak, or living fence, and it produces edible pea-like seeds every single year for 50 years or more. The seeds taste slightly nutty, similar to lentils or chickpeas, and they're packed with protein. Harvest them in late summer when the pods are full and starting to dry. Shell them out, cook them like any dried legume, or grind them into flour. One mature shrub produces several pounds of seeds per year. Plant a hedgerow of 10 shrubs, and you've got a permanent protein source that requires zero replanting. But here's the bonus. Most people miss. The young shoots and leaves are edible in spring, and livestock, chickens, goats, rabbits, will browse on the foliage. It's a multi-use survival crop that feeds you, feeds your animals, and improves your soil all at once. Why it's on the list. In a long-term collapse, soil fertility becomes the limiting factor. Siberian pea shrub fixes that while giving you food. It's hardy, productive, and once it's established, you can't kill it if you tried. Number 9. Sea kale. The perennial nobody knows that tastes like 3 different vegetables. Sea kale, Cramba maritima, is a coastal European plant that's been feeding people for centuries, but it's almost unknown in North America. That's a mistake, because sea kale is one of the most versatile, low-maintenance perennial vegetables you can grow, and it thrives in conditions that would kill most crops. Here's what makes it genius. Every part of this plant is edible at different times of the year. In early spring, the young shoots taste like asparagus, tender, mild, and delicious. As the plant matures, the leaves taste like cabbage or kale, hearty, nutrient-dense greens. In late spring, the flower buds taste like broccoli and can be harvested before they open. You're getting 3 crops from one plant, and that plant comes back every year for 10 to 15 years without replanting. Sea kale is cold hardy, down to zone 4, tolerates poor sandy or rocky soil, and actually prefers neglect. Overwatering kills it. Rich soil makes it weak. It wants to be left alone on a sunny hillside or a neglected corner of your property, and it will produce food every spring like clockwork. Planting is simple. Start from root cuttings or crowns. Plant them in well-drained soil with full sun, mulch lightly, then forget about them. The first year, don't harvest, let the plant establish. Year 2 onward, harvest shoots in spring by blanching them under a bucket or mound of soil for sweeter, more tender growth. Seed saving is automatic. Let sunflower stalks mature, collect the seeds, and plant them, or just let the plant self-seed and transplant volunteers. Why it's on the list. Sea kale gives you multiple harvests from one plant, thrives in terrible conditions, and requires almost no care. In a long-term scenario where your time and energy are stretched thin, crops that take care of themselves are the ones that keep you alive. Number 8. Jerusalem artichoke. The perennial potato that outproduces everything. If you've ever grown potatoes, you know they're labor-intensive. Digging, hilling, replanting every year, Jerusalem artichoke, also called sunchoke, gives you the same calorie-dense tubers, except it's perennial, requires zero maintenance, and produces so aggressively that your only problem will be controlling its spread. Here's the survival advantage. One sunchoke tuber planted in spring turns into 5 to 10 pounds of tubers by fall. Those tubers store in the ground all winter, meaning you dig them up fresh as needed, even through snow. No root cellar required. The ground is your storage. Sunchokes are native to North America, so they're adapted to harsh conditions. They tolerate poor soil, drought, shade, and neglect. Plant them once, and they'll spread into a permanent food source that produces more every year. In fact, the biggest challenge is keeping them from taking over your entire property. The tubers taste slightly sweet and nutty, like a cross between a potato and a water chestnut. Roast them, mash them, slice them raw into salads, or ferment them. They're high in inulin, a prebiotic fiber that's great for gut health, but can cause gas if you eat too much at once. Start small and let your body adjust. Growing them is effortless. Plant tubers in spring, 4 to 6 inches deep, 12 inches apart. They grow 6 to 10 feet tall, producing bright yellow sunflower-like blooms in late summer. In fall, after the first frost kills the tops, dig up tubers as needed. Leave some in the ground and they'll regrow next year. Seed saving isn't necessary, you're propagating from tubers. Just keep back a few small tubers each year and replant them. Why it's on the list? Sunchokes are the ultimate set-it-and-forget-it calorie crop. Once established, they produce forever with zero inputs. In a long-term collapse where you can't afford to waste time or energy on high-maintenance crops, sunchokes are your insurance policy. Number 7. Asparagus. The spring survival crop that produces for 20 years. Asparagus is one of those crops most people think is too fancy or too difficult for survival gardening. That's wrong. Asparagus is one of the lowest maintenance, highest reward perennial vegetables you can plant, and once it's established, it produces fresh food every spring for 2 decades or more. Here's why it matters. Asparagus emerges in early spring, often before the last frost, when nothing else in your garden is ready. It's the first fresh vegetable of the season, packed with vitamins A, C, K, and folate. In a long-term collapse, where fresh food is scarce and your body is depleted from months of stored rations, that early spring nutrition is critical. One established asparagus bed, 10 feet by 4 feet, produces 10 to 20 pounds of spears per year. That's 6 to 8 weeks of daily harvests starting in April or May, and it requires almost no work. No weeding once it's mulched. No replanting. No fertilizing if you mulch with compost. Planting requires patience. Asparagus takes 2 to 3 years to fully establish, so you don't harvest the first year or two. But once it's mature, it produces for 15 to 25 years. You plant it once, and your grandchildren will still be eating from it. Here's how to do it right. Dig a trench 6 to 8 inches deep and 12 inches wide. Lay crowns, root bundles at the bottom, 12 to 18 inches apart. Cover with 2 inches of soil. As the plants grow, gradually fill in the trench over the season. Mulch heavily with straw or leaves every fall to suppress weeds and feed the soil. Harvest is simple. In spring, when spears emerge and reach 6 to 8 inches tall, snap them off at ground level. Harvest daily for 6 to 8 weeks. Then stop and let the remaining spears grow into tall, feathery foliage. That foliage feeds the roots for next year's production. Why it's on the list? Asparagus is the ultimate spring insurance. When food is scarce and your body is desperate for fresh nutrients, asparagus delivers. It's low maintenance, long-lived, and once it's established, it's virtually indestructible. Number 6. Rhubarb. the indestructible perennial that doubles as mulch. Rhubarb is one of those crops people grow for pies and desserts, but in a survival scenario, it's so much more. It's a hardy, productive perennial that thrives in cold climates, produces vitamin-rich stalks for decades, and its massive leaves create natural mulch that feeds your soil and suppresses weeds. Here's the survival angle. Rhubarb is cold-hardy down to zone 3, tolerates poor soil, and once established, produces 5 to 10 pounds of stalks per plant every year for 20 years or more. The stalks are high in vitamin K, calcium, and antioxidants, and they store well when frozen, canned, or dried. But here's what most people miss. Those giant rhubarb leaves, the ones you can't eat because they contain oxalic acid, are biodegradable mulch machines. Lay them around other plants, and they break down quickly, adding organic matter to your soil while keeping weeds at bay. In a long-term scenario where you can't buy mulch or compost, rhubarb gives you both food and fertility. Growing rhubarb is effortless. Plant crowns in early spring, in a sunny or partially shaded spot with decent drainage. Space them 3 to 4 feet apart. Mulch around the base with compost or straw. Then ignore them. Rhubarb doesn't need fertilizer, doesn't need much water, and doesn't care if you forget it exists. Harvest is simple. In the second year after planting, you can start harvesting. Grab a stalk at the base and pull it off. Don't cut with a knife, as that can introduce disease. Harvest only about a third of the stalks at a time, leaving the rest to feed the plant. Seed saving isn't necessary. Rhubarb propagates by division. Every 5 to 7 years, dig up the crown in early spring, divide it into sections with a sharp knife, and replant. One plant becomes 5. Why it's on the list: rhubarb is virtually indestructible. It thrives in climates that kill most perennials, produces for decades, and gives you both food and mulch. In a long-term collapse where every resource matters, rhubarb is a no-brainer. Number 5. Chives. The smallest perennial with the biggest impact. Chives are that herb everyone grows in a pot on their windowsill and mostly ignores. But in a survival garden, chives are a resilient, productive perennial allium that returns every year, requires zero maintenance, and provides flavor, nutrition, and immune-supporting compounds when food variety collapses. Here's why they matter. When your diet becomes monotonous, potatoes, beans, squash, repeat, flavor matters. Not just for morale, but because eating the same bland foods every day leads to appetite fatigue, and people stop eating enough. Chives add onion-like flavor to everything, making survival food more palatable and keeping you nourished. But chives aren't just about taste. Alliums contain sulfur compounds, antioxidants, and immune-boosting properties. In a long-term scenario where medical care is limited and you're exposed to stress, poor sanitation, and potential illness, those compounds matter. Chives are cold-hardy to zone 3, grow in sun or partial shade, tolerate poor soil, and spread slowly into dense clumps. One plant becomes a permanent patch that produces edible leaves and edible flowers from spring through fall. Growing them is effortless. Plant divisions or seeds in spring, space 6 inches apart. Water occasionally the first season. After that, they take care of themselves. Harvest by snipping leaves with scissors, never pull. They'll regrow within weeks. Propagation is simple. Every 3 to 4 years, dig up a clump in early spring, divide it into smaller sections, and replant. One patch becomes 5. Why it's on the list? Chives are small but essential. They add nutrition, flavor, and immune support to a survival diet, and they require almost no space or effort. In a long-term collapse, the crops that keep you eating, not just surviving, are the ones that matter most. Number 4. Perennial kale. The rare source of year-round greens that never needs replanting. Most people think of kale as an annual crop. You plant seeds every spring, harvest for a season, then it bolts and dies. But tree collards and certain perennial kale varieties are different. They're woody, shrub-like plants that produce edible leaves year-round, even through mild winters, and they keep producing for 5 to 10 years without replanting. Here's the survival advantage. Leafy greens are critical for vitamins A, C, K, calcium, and iron. nutrients that disappear fast in a collapse when fresh food is scarce. Annual greens are seasonal. Perennial kale is constant. Tree collards grow 4 to 8 feet tall, tolerate heat, cold, down to zone 7 to 8 and some varieties lower, and poor soil. You plant cuttings, not seeds, and they root easily. One plant produces several pounds of leaves per year, and you can harvest continuously without killing the plant. The leaves taste similar to regular kale, slightly bitter, earthy, hearty. Use them raw in salads when young, or cook them in soups, stir-fries, or stews when mature. Growing them is simple. Take a 6 to 8 inch cutting from a healthy plant, strip the lower leaves, and stick it in moist soil. It roots in 2 to 3 weeks. Space plants 3 to 4 feet apart in full sun or partial shade. Mulch around the base. Harvest outer leaves regularly to encourage new growth. Propagation is effortless. Just take more cuttings. One plant becomes unlimited plants. Why it's on the list. In a long-term collapse, vitamin deficiency becomes a real threat. Perennial kale solves that. It's a permanent source of fresh greens that requires minimal space, minimal care, and produces even when annual crops fail. Number 3. Good King Henry, the cold hardy perennial green that outproduces spinach. Good King Henry, Blightum bonus henricus, is a European perennial that's been feeding people since medieval times, but it's almost unknown in modern gardens. That's a mistake, because Good King Henry is a spinach alternative that's more productive, more cold hardy, and doesn't bolt in summer heat like annual spinach does. Here's why it's genius. Annual spinach grows fast, but bolts goes to seed. The moment temperatures rise or days get long, you get maybe 4 to 6 weeks of harvest, then it's over. Good King Henry produces edible leaves from early spring through late fall without bolting. One plant gives you 6 months of continuous harvest. The leaves taste similar to spinach, mild, slightly earthy, and they're packed with vitamins A, C, calcium, and iron. Use them raw when young, or cook them like spinach when mature. The young shoots in spring can be blanched and eaten like asparagus. Good King Henry is cold hardy to zone 3, tolerates partial shade, and grows in poor soil. It's a set-it-and-forget-it crop that produces for 5 to 10 years once established. Planting is simple. Start from seeds or root divisions in spring, spaced 12 inches apart. Mulch lightly, water occasionally the first season. After that, it takes care of itself. Harvest by picking outer leaves regularly. The plant keeps producing new growth from the center. In late fall, cut it back to the ground, mulch over it, and it will re-emerge in spring. Why it's on the list. In a long-term collapse, fresh greens are one of the first things to disappear. Good King Henry gives you a permanent, low-maintenance source of leafy nutrition that outperforms annual spinach in every way. Number 2. Egyptian walking onions. The self-propagating onion that never stops growing. This is one of the weirdest, most fascinating perennial crops you can grow, and once you plant it, you'll never need to buy onion seeds or sets again. Egyptian walking onions, also called tree onions or top-setting onions, are a perennial allium that produces both edible greens and small bulbs, and it literally walks across your garden by replanting itself. Here's how it works. The plant grows like a regular onion, producing green stalks you can harvest and eat like scallions. But instead of flowering, it produces a cluster of tiny bulblets at the top of the stalk. Those bulblets get heavy, the stalk bends over and touches the ground, and the bulblets root and grow into new plants. The onion walks. The survival advantage is obvious. You plant once, and you have a permanent, self-renewing onion patch. The greens are edible year-round in mild climates, and the bulblets can be harvested and used like shallots or pickled whole. Egyptian walking onions are cold hardy to zone 3, tolerate poor soil, and grow in sun or partial shade. They're nearly indestructible. Drought, neglect, freezing temperatures, they keep producing. Planting is simple. Buy bulblets or small plants, plant them 4 inches deep and 6 inches apart. Water occasionally the first season. After that, they take care of themselves. Harvest greens by snipping with scissors. They regrow like chives. Harvest bulblets in late summer when they're firm and mature. Eat some, replant some, and the cycle continues. Why it's on the list. Egyptian walking onions are the ultimate low-maintenance perennial. They propagate themselves, require zero replanting, and give you both greens and bulbs indefinitely. In a collapse scenario where seed availability becomes uncertain, crops that regenerate themselves are priceless. Number 1, American groundnut, the native perennial protein powerhouse nobody knows about. This is the crop that should be in every survival garden, but almost no one grows. American groundnut, Apios americana, is a native North American perennial vine that produces edible tubers high in protein and starch, and it fixes nitrogen into the soil while it grows. It's the perfect combination of calories, protein, and soil fertility in one plant. Here's the survival advantage. Groundnut tubers are 15 to 17% protein by dry weight. That's higher than potatoes, sweet potatoes, or any other root crop. In a long-term collapse where meat is scarce and beans are your only protein source, groundnut gives you another option, and it's perennial. The tubers taste nutty and slightly sweet, like a cross between a potato and a bean. Boil them, roast them, mash them, or slice them into stews. They're calorie-dense, nutrient-rich, and they store in the ground all winter just like sunchokes. Groundnut is a native plant, so it's adapted to North American climates. It's cold-hardy to Zone 3, grows in sun or partial shade, and thrives in moist soil near streams, ponds, or lowland areas. It's a nitrogen-fixing legume, so it improves your soil while it produces food. The plant is a vining perennial that grows 6 to 10 feet tall, producing fragrant purple-brown flowers in summer. It spreads slowly by underground tubers, forming a permanent patch that produces more each year. Planting is simple. Buy tubers or dig wild plants with permission, and transplant them. Plant tubers 3 inches deep, 12 inches apart, near a trellis, fence, or support structure. Mulch lightly. Water regularly the first season. After that, they're self-sufficient. Harvest tubers in late fall or early spring by digging carefully around the base. Leave some tubers in place to regrow. One small tuber planted this year becomes a pound of food next year, and 5 pounds the year after that. Why it's number 1. American groundnut is the most underrated perennial crop for long-term survival. It gives you protein, calories, nitrogen fixation, and it's native, meaning it's adapted to survive without you. In a collapse where soil fertility declines and protein sources disappear, groundnut is the crop that keeps you fed and keeps your garden productive. 10 crops, that's it. You plant them once and they feed you for decades. No annual replanting, no seed dependency, no fertilizer supply chains, just permanent food infrastructure that keeps producing even when everything else fails. Here's your reality check. Perennials take time to establish. If you wait until the collapse is obvious, you're already too late. The time to plant is now, while you can still get crowns, cuttings, and tubers. Because in 3 years, when the seed companies are sold out and the nurseries are empty, you'll already be harvesting while everyone else is starving. What perennial crop are you planting first? Drop a comment. And if you're serious about long-term food security, hit subscribe, because this channel is about building systems that last, not reacting when it's too late.